Welcome to the webinar. We're going to begin in just half a minute. Before we begin, if you've not accessed the handout materials, if you go to www.laweasy, it's LAWEASY.com, laweasy.com, the first item on the home page will be a Word document or a text document of the content of the PowerPoint we're going to use for the presentation. And if you scroll down a little to where the PowerPoints on the website are grouped, the first PowerPoint there will be the actual PowerPoint that we're going to use on this presentation. So if you have not gotten the materials, please feel free to do so. And they'll be left there indefinitely, so you'll have access to them. In addition, the actual recording of this webinar will be posted on LawEasy as well. For professional attendees, if you want to get professional credits for the program, I'm not quite sure how long it'll take, but in a short order, a recording of the program will be available on Lawline, LAWLINE.com. If you subscribe to their service or choose to, you can get credit for the program. My name is Marty Shankman. I want to introduce our panelists. Brian Boak is a consultant with Singer Nelson Charlmers Insurance. Carol Kaufman is the founder of CB Data Life Inventory Solutions. And Eric Maynard is with I-Corps of Northern New Jersey, a professional care management and guardian firm. The program today is Estate and Financial Planning for Aging Parents. We're going to take a very broad and eclectic view of the topic. And the purpose is to not just focus on estate planning or what's purely financial, but the myriad of other issues that are really critical to properly plan an estate or address financial planning for an aging parent. And while the paradigm that we're using is planning for an aging parent, bear in mind that the concepts that we're going to talk about will apply to not just people that are getting on in years, but there's approximately 130 million Americans living with chronic illness, and many of these planning ideas will apply to them as well. One other general comment, the audience is a very mixed group of people, from consumers to social workers and RNs and attorneys, accountants, and non-professionals, consumers as well. So we're going to do our best to try to make the program relevant to everybody. And I think the broad eclectic approach we're taking will hopefully assure that whatever discipline you're in as a professional, or whether you're a consumer with specific types of questions, that we'll try to address some new points that will be of interest to you. Just to set the framework or the background, the population in our country is clearly aging. Every day, 10,000 new people turn age 65, and I can tell you on a personal level, 65 is starting to sound younger every year. By 2030, it's estimated that a fifth of all Americans will be age 65 and older. It's not only merely the numbers of the aging population that make this type of planning so vital and critical, but it's also the changing social structure, geographic diversity, the ages where, the times where you know, Andy of Mayberry and everybody lived in the same town, grew up in the same town, and raised their family in the same town, and their grandkids in the same town, is long gone. So oftentimes the mere geographic spread of family has served to break down the ability of the support network that people historically had relied on to be there today. The breakdown of the nuclear family, divorce, multiple working spouses, all these issues have played into, in a very significant way, the types of steps that need to be taken to protect an aging parent. 90% of seniors have at least one chronic disease. 77% have two or more chronic diseases. So even though chronic disease is not necessarily only relevant for the aging, for those that are aging, these challenges are far more significant. Cognitive issues grow with age. So these are all things that we need to address in the planning that we're going to do to try to help these parents or elderly clients, if you're a professional, or elderly family members, as the case may be. One of the challenges, and I think it's important to point out, is many of the difficulties that an aging parent, and we'll just use the phrase aging parent, but it could apply to any person, is that a very significant portion of the challenges of disease are invisible. So somebody may look fine, but may not be fine. Neurologic symptoms such as chronic fatigue, chronic pain, cognitive issues, memory loss, unless they're very severe, there may be absolutely no physical indication. And one of the things that we're going to talk about, and I'm very pleased that Eric Maynard has agreed to join and comment on, is the vital importance of bringing in to the planning process a professional care manager, RN or other professional, and we'll talk about that. And this is one of the reasons it's so critical. You could be very close and very involved on a regular basis with an aging parent, and you may not see things that a professional will pick up in a heartbeat. So these are things we're going to talk about. Many elderly parents do not understand the myriad of ways that their professional advisory team can help them. And I think it's even safe to say that many of the children and other family members who serve in caregiver roles don't understand how much of a contribution to making their lives easier and safer and helping them help their aging parent better their professionals can provide. And we're going to talk about that. One of the things we're not going to talk about is Medicaid planning. It's really very state-specific, and we have people from all over the country listening in, and it's really a separate specialty. We're going to talk about pretty much almost everything but that. Personal issues are vital. Religious issues are something that could be a very significant factor for many aging parents, and that's something that needs to be addressed. We'll briefly talk about that just to alert you to where to integrate that into the process. From a legal document perspective, I think most people are aware of some of the documents. We'll make some brief comments towards the end of the program on them, time permitting, on living wills, health proxies, and HIPAA releases. And I think the key point is simply that all the planning documents and other planning steps all need to be tailored for the specific situation. And you have to be very, very mindful that relying on a simplistic form is not enough. And the most significant point, I think the key of our whole program, and I think this sort of eclectic group of participants on our panel will help drive home, is it's not just about the legal documents. It's not just about the asset allocation. There's much, much more. The kind of phrase, where you hear that it takes a village to raise a child, it really takes a team to protect an elderly parent. It's wonderful when an aging parent has a trusted family member or friend that really can be there as a caregiver and help them. We're going to talk in a few minutes about the role of a care manager. There's so many vital things that a care manager can bring to the table. And too often that role is not integrated with the estate and financial planning, and that's something that should be done. The financial advisor and the wealth manager are a key component to the planning. And it's not merely just what investments are made. It's important to be involved in budgeting. It's important for the financial professionals to be involved in the document organization, which Carol will talk about, and monitoring things. It's important to be involved in documenting what type of charitable gifts the aging parent may have made, may want to make, and so on. Insurance is a very, very broad topic that's vital to so many aging parents, and it's not only buying long-term care or qualifying long-term care, or you can't get long-term care. That's only one very tiny component of the planning process. Just as an example, and we have Brian Boak on the call as a panelist to comment, property and casualty insurance is almost always ignored, and that's something that really could be critically devastating if it's not addressed properly. Certainly the estate planner should be part of the team. Too often the estate planner is viewed as the sole source of this planning, and I think that this one slide should hopefully drive home the point that that's absolutely not the case. The estate planner is but one of many. The accountant needs to be involved, and again, it's not only from the standpoint of filing tax returns, but I'll give you a wonderful example of where an accountant can be an incredible tool. Once all the financial and legal documents are organized, having an accountant as sort of an independent monitor to do a monthly write-up or just enter all the disbursements the aging parent is making and issuing a report to perhaps the children or the parent and a child, or perhaps the person who's the agent under the power of attorney, can be one of the most incredibly important safeguards to make sure that nothing amiss is going on. If you have an accountant that's monitoring financial matters along with the other team members, for really very modest cost, you can catch and nip in the bud some pretty ugly stuff that we've all seen happen far too often with elder financial abuse. Life inventory archivist, there's a range of different types of things that need to be organized for any of this to work. And too often, just like the property and casualty insurance, that's kind of ignored and overlooked, and it really can't be. And Carol Kaufman will help all of us understand better what that can be. And the reason for the other is twofold. One, I'm a lawyer, so I always have to have another category, right? But the other point is that whatever you're doing, everything needs to be tailored to you. If religion is vitally critical to your parent and you don't have a religious advisor reviewing certain aspects of the planning, to violate somebody's religious beliefs in the waning days of their life is simply inexcusable and shouldn't happen. So the other means whatever works or whatever is important for you as a caregiver or an advisor and for your aging parent, the client, the person that all this is being directed to help, don't forget the other. It has to be tailored. There are no pat answers. Let's very quickly just talk about chronic illness. I had given some statistics as to how chronic illness increases with age and the significance of chronic illness to the elderly. I'm just going to illustrate it with just one example, and I'm going to go through it quickly because there's so much more to cover. Parkinson's disease, clearly the incidence of Parkinson's disease occurs with far greater frequency as people age. So at age 50, it's less than 10 per 100,000. By age 80, it's 200 per 100,000. So you need to be alert, because if your parent, the aging client, is getting regular care and attention, and the signs of whatever disease or challenges they face are picked up early, a range of different things can be done, from better medical care, which perhaps a regular involvement of a care manager can help identify, different financial planning, perhaps changing their estate planning. You need to be on top of it. Some of the symptoms, rigidity, bradykinesia, of slowness of movement, posture instability, and it can vary very significantly from person to person. And this is a critical point. Too often we see a TV show and presume that, okay, these are the symptoms of Alzheimer's. These are the symptoms of Parkinson's. First, every disease is quite different. So you can't make an assumption that because an aging parent or client has a chronic disease that their symptoms or the impact on their life or life expectancy is the same. Each disease is quite different. And even for a client or parent with the same disease as somebody else you know, don't be tempted to make assumptions. Mr. X had this, therefore my mother, because she has Parkinson's, will have the same. It can be very, very different. The incidence of cognitive impairment increases with age, but yet the vast majority still remain capable of making decisions. And this is important because too often people assume that if somebody has Alzheimer's, they can't be involved in their decision process. Gross mischaracterization. First of all, it depends at what stage of the illness. It depends on what the impact is on that person. And it's also very situational specific, depending on what decisions are being involved. So we can talk about that more later when we get time. So just to summarize, I wanted to demonstrate how significant the numbers, the statistics are of the aging population, and how you really need a diverse group of professional advisors to help advise clients, and aging clients in particular, on these issues. The next topic, which I think is something that attorneys and financial advisors in particular need to be far more aware of and understanding of and involved in the process, is the role of a care manager. And what I'd like to do is turn this over to Eric Maynard from ICOR and let Eric explain the role of a care manager. And Eric, why don't you take it over, and I'll advance the slides as you request, and feel free to vary from them if you choose to.
Okay, thank you, Marty. I appreciate it very much. You know, you can move that slide right along as we get to the definition of what a care manager is. But even before we get into what a care manager is, I'd like you to be thinking about where you all are and your aging parents or client situation, and consider the fact that there are approximately 44 million Americans who act as caregivers, not necessarily care managers. And it's estimated that there are that the average age and demographic of a caregiver is a family member who is female, and usually the average age is about 46 years old, and they're caring for someone over the age of 50. So there's a lot of stress within the family, and a care manager, an RN, a nurse, patient advocate, is suited to come in and provide a care plan that may give respite to the family members, but also coming in with that trained medical eye as a RN patient advocate to evaluate the entire environment where the aging client or aging parent is living, whether they're at home or they're already in an assisted living or even in a nursing home. Having the care manager independent of those locations, institutions, being able to find out what is going on with this person, their physical health, their mental well-being, their interactions with other people. I'm sure we're going to talk a little bit about undue influence with regards to the dangers that some of our elderly people may find themselves in. And, of course, the living environment. Are there obstacles in their way? Are they living in a place that has potential hazards? What can be done to improve their quality of life and their living situation? That's the importance of having a care manager with that trained eye. You can move to the next slide there, Marty. There are a number of professional organizations, and of course the NAP GCM is a designation for some people to have, the professional geriatric care manager. But there are other organizations that you should look at as well when selecting a care manager. Be certain that they have the monikers that are going to be safety features, in a sense. You certainly want someone who's going to be a registered nurse or have their master's in social work, but there are other organizations too. The Society for Certified Senior Advisors is a good place to start as well, or the National Guardianship Association, or the Commission for Care Management Certification. These are organizations that will have a test. They will examine the person's background, and they will require prerequisites. They have a medical background as an RN. They are living by a code of ethics and standards that they are held to and that are evaluated and kept current on a regular basis, for some of those continuing education credits. And then, of course, you can find other people who have these acronyms or abbreviations behind their names by looking up on the internet for patient advocates and things such as that. And of course, I-Corps has a website, I-Corps USA, and you can put in a zip code there as well. Let's go to the next slide there, Marty, because this has to do with the information for the team. It's important that that as a patient advocate, that they are part of this care planning team and the professional team, so that they're your resource to find out how's the best way to meet with this person. Should we meet them at home? Should we meet them in the morning? Should we meet them in the afternoon? Should we meet them in the evening? That often has a challenge to go along with that. But as you can see from the slide right there, care managers in the home will conduct an interview, and they bring a set of skills. And the example says that RN patient advocates or the care manager have the medical background and also the interpersonal skills to translate a medical understanding of the parent's disease and talk to the family about the plan as it goes forward, and of course talk to the other estate planners as they're moving forward too. Also, the outside care manager, they may see that, hey, somebody in the family is really trying to make decisions to improve their lot in life, whereas a patient advocate is truly focused upon the unique needs of the patient. You can move to the next slide there, Marty. And of course, you know, the care manager's role is to help the parent see the correct professionals, the physicians, the neurologists, even as the example says, because a patient advocate will be available to go to doctor's appointments and help arrange for those appointments. You know how it is when you go to the doctor and you're having your own exam and you walk out and you get home and your spouse says, "So, what did the doctor say? What did the doctor say?" "Well, he said I'm fine. I'm going to live." You know, that may be good news. But with a patient advocate, you have somebody who can actually follow up on that conversation and recall what did the doctor say and determine that the prescription is not going to have an adverse interaction with the other medications that are part of that may already be part of the aging parent's regimen. You can move to the next slide, Marty. And then, of course, at the home, the care manager can do some forensics of their own. You know, do a mini mental to find out how's the person's cognitive state. You know, we all decline as we get older. So dementia is a part of what we all get to look forward to, but there are certain levels, and for some people, it comes in a little faster than for others. Dementia does not mean that they're losing their mind. It means that it's just taking them a little longer to process. So an RN patient advocate generally are trained to have that patience, in a sense, to give the patient the time that they need in order to answer. But with assessment tools, they can certainly come up with a better understanding of the client's need.
Just a quick comment as an attorney.
Yeah, sure.
As an attorney, the decision and the determination whether or not somebody's competent to sign a new will or to sign a trust document or to make a gift is really a legal determination. But as an attorney, we as lawyers don't have the kind of background and training that a care manager may have. And integrating a care manager into that process can provide the attorney that's making the determination a very good insight into what's really going on, can provide an insight into what's really going on in the home, which most attorneys and other professionals don't make a visit, and even if they did, they wouldn't have the skill set to evaluate what the signs are as to what's happening. So a lot of the issues that arise with elder financial abuse or somebody pushing an elderly parent to make a new will or change things can be addressed with the cooperation and help of the care manager. And that's a role that has not been utilized nearly enough, and that's just something I want to give all of you listening as food for thought.
That's excellent, and I'm glad you moved to the next slide, because here's where it becomes vitally important. You know, as I mentioned first on, that there are caregivers, and most caregivers are family members, and this puts a lot of pressure on the family member and the aging parent. So it's important that when a care manager, an RN patient advocate, is placing caregivers in the home, that those caregivers are also very well vetted. It's a dangerous thing. It can be a dangerous thing to just have, you know, a neighbor, a distant relative come into the home and start to make some decisions for this person's care, and without a RN patient advocate overseeing the in-home care, you could have a very sad situation on your hands. So placing a caregiver in the home that has been identified and is coming through a licensed agency is very important as a part of providing the care. So there's a difference between that care manager and the caregiver. You want that care manager to be watching the type of care so that they are objective in their in how is the care being delivered truly helping the patient. Not does the schedule fit the caregiver, but is it meeting the needs of the one that we're caring for? So the care manager obviously plays a critical role in helping to facilitate the care, the setting up of the financial planning with the help of the professionals who, such as an attorney, a CPA, an organizer, so that the care is focused on the best possible care being given to the individual. Okay, Marty?
One of the things to consider is when you create a power of attorney for an aging parent or a revocable living trust, and frankly both, consider mandating that an independent care manager be required to be called in, say, quarterly or perhaps initially just annually or semi-annually, expanding to quarterly depending on the decline the aging parent is experiencing, so that there's an independent report given. One of the powerful ways this can be used is so often we see children that are living at a distance. You know, an elderly parent is living in New Jersey or New York, and the child's living on the West Coast. Having an independent care manager come in periodically that is not involved in the regular medical care, that is not an employee of the attorney, the accountant, or anyone else, that is truly independent to draft and write and provide a report is a phenomenal way to give that child some real peace of mind as to what's going on with the parent. And that's something we don't see enough of. For people that are single and really don't have a family backstop that they can rely on, that could be their assurance by starting a process like that while they're still competent enough and aware enough to know what's going on, to create a mechanism to protect them as time goes on. So consider integrating the concept of a care manager and the role of what a care manager can do into the actual legal structure, not only having the care manager as a member of the team. Now, one of the things that is, again, so often overlooked that's really one of the fundamental foundation pieces for planning is getting organized. You can have the best intent to do the best estate tax planning, to have the best investment allocation, to do the best to care for an aging parent. If you don't have their, let's call it stuff, and we'll get a better definition in a moment, organized, none of the other planning can really take place in a proper way. Carol Kaufman is I don't want to insult her by saying a professional organizer, but she's developed some fascinating software and an entire process, which if you could do it briefly, Carol, maybe you can explain it as you finish explaining the process of getting organized and what it really means.
I'd be happy to. Thank you, Marty. A Boston marketing firm did a study that said that we spend, on average, 55 minutes a day looking for things we know we have, but we can't remember where we put them. And I know you're all laughing. That means that by the time you're 50, you've probably spent about 2 years of your life looking for things. And that only gets worse as we age, and eventually dementia issues occur. This is what contributes to the $35 to $400 billion of assets that have been escheated to state governments too often because people don't know what assets are where, be it because they've forgotten or because their children haven't told them. I specialize in something called organization of your life inventory. And organization and aggregation are two different things. It's one thing to be organized, but if you don't have all the right pieces, and if you're missing certain pieces, you can miss key planning. Estate planners do not like to have surprises. So it's very important to know what needs to be included and to pull all of the information together so that it's in one safe, secure, and accessible location. A lot of people have asked me or spoken with me about organizing, and when I say to them, are you organized? I will get one of 4 answers. The first one is, of course I'm organized. It's all in my head. That doesn't help. The second answer is, I just don't have the time. The third answer is, get organized? I wouldn't even know where to start. It's so overwhelming, it's paralyzing. And the last answer, which is the saddest one, and which is the one I had to live with, was, someone can worry about it when I'm gone. Wasn't intentional, but it happened to me because my parents were in a car accident. Marty, next slide, please. So I like to refer to everything that someone needs for proper planning as their life inventory. Most people have passwords in one document or program, their legal documents somewhere else, their financial information someplace else, and their medical information yet another place. But if all of them are in different places, when crises hit, medical or natural, that is not the time to scramble to get everything, if you remember where everything is. It's the time to have all of the information right at your fingertips in one place so you and your trusted advisor can make informed decisions and so nothing falls through the cracks. Now, what are these kinds of things? And Marty has put on here different types of information to organize. I have an entire checklist if anyone is interested, and I'd be happy to send you or post it so that you can get a copy of a life inventory checklist. But it includes your investments, your passwords, and we'll talk about that in a minute, your pets, your there are, in fact, Marty, you familiar with the pet planning documents?
Yeah, that's something we can talk about, but we're going to be a little tight on time today.
Okay. Your insurance, your trusts, your medical information, all of these are very important. The one thing I would like to stress that has just come up recently is the digital afterlife. There was an article in Private Wealth magazine on death in the digital age on January 4th. Most people fail to leave behind an accurate record of current usernames and passwords that let the appropriate people access their online accounts after they die. And as a result, security features that protected these people from fraud online while they were alive become a major barrier to anybody who needs to access their online information in order to settle their affairs. So for a trustee or an executor or a personal representative, these barriers can mean expensive delays in estate settlement and the risks of inaccurate accounting. Very important. Next slide. So a home inventory, for me, is for every place that you have things. It's not just your home. You may live on a boat. You may have things in a warehouse that you hadn't thought about. You need, excuse me, to be able to have an inventory of all of your different assets, all of your different documents, all of your different passwords, and have them all accessible. And accessible means securely so that you can get to them as quickly as you need to, and so that you can share them with all of the team that Marty's been talking about and that you will continue to hear. The most important thing is that a life inventory crosses all of the disciplines that you are hearing about today. And the software that Marty mentioned pulls that information together and creates intelligent reports, such as an emergency wallet card or a wallet contents report, so that if an aging parent loses something, is pickpocketed, or loses their purse somewhere, they immediately, and you immediately, have a list of everything that was in it and how to cancel those credit cards and replace those pieces of information. Finally, when you go into a medical doctor's office, these days everything is split up so that when you go into a doctor's office, the doctor is only seeing one piece of you, the piece that that doctor treats. And a medical intake form, which is something that the product also generates, lets the doctor see all of you, all of the doctors that you go to, all the diagnoses, all of the allergies, all of the medications that have been prescribed. So you can see the life inventory crosses everything.
Let
Marty?
me interject a real quick comment. It is absolutely standard that every will that anybody has, and hopefully everybody listening has a will, and all of their clients or family members do as well, standard provision deals with the distribution of personal property. And I can tell you from doing this for over 30 years, while it may seem like one of the simplest provisions, it can also be one of the most emotionally laden and controversial provisions in a document where you're seeking to allocate and distribute personality that could be very significant to some children or heirs and not to others. I don't believe in the vast majority of cases when people write a will or a lawyer drafts the clause to distribute the property under that will that anyone has the kind of data that Carol's talking about. Wouldn't it be novel for the client to actually have a list and see what really significant artwork or collectibles or heirlooms they have when they're writing that list and when they're talking to an attorney?
That's a really good point, and you made one point that I had wanted to, which I will reinforce. How can anyone expect a trusted advisor, be they an attorney, an insurance broker, or a healthcare advocate, to do their job if they don't have all the information? People don't understand the meaning of the word estate. An estate doesn't equal a mansion. It doesn't equal how big your house is. It's what you have. And everyone has something they want somebody else to have. If it isn't documented, as Marty said, it won't happen. So if you do a home inventory, if you put into it who you would like to ultimately have that, at least your wishes will have been able to have been fulfilled. Marty?
Yes, let's go on to the next topic, investment and financial planning. So with the background, when you really actually have all the information and you have somebody that's looking in on the aging parent so we really know what's going on, you can then approach developing an investment and financial plan that's appropriate for the parent. You really can't determine what they need without understanding the parent's status. So for example, everybody as they age or anybody as a chronic illness or health challenge makes being independent more difficult, everybody wants to stay independent. And if the planning is done correctly, we can help that aging parent or other person stay independent longer. So the organization that Carol was talking about is one of the most fundamental steps to keeping somebody independent. And ditto with having an independent care manager come in to see what's really going on. Now, from a financial perspective, consolidating and simplifying the holdings, relying on a single financial management firm or trust company can really do wonders to help simplify and create yet another, if you will, source or person to keep an eye on what's going on. So the simpler it is, the more empowered the aging parent can be and the longer they can stay in place.
Yeah, Marty, I love that last bullet. I just, that last bullet on that last slide, it's just so important that, that everybody walk away from this right here, that empowering the patient, the parent, that's the challenge, and that's what we want to accomplish with even with this webinar. Thanks, Marty.
What I see almost universally when anybody that is getting on in years or has a health challenge or cognitive issue comes in is they have a score of bank and brokerage accounts scattered all over the place. They have no organized financial plan. Getting everything in one place, getting it organized, and doing the other things that we said before can make it incredibly more practical for that individual to stay in control of their key decisions much longer. Much of the assets that Carol talked about that are lost that I see are assets that you can't keep track of and nobody knows, and somebody that finds them, in effect, walks off with them. And very simply, you also should start with a budget, because a budget will identify appropriate expenditures. If this is done while the parent is alive, well, and competent, can participate, deviations from a normal budget can be a red flag to help somebody identify elder financial abuse. So again, the simple process of a budget so that you have something to compare to can be incredibly helpful. If all of a sudden there's large donations to a charity that the parent had never given to, having a budget and having things organized will help make that stand out. But you can't stand out if you don't have a touchstone to stand out from. Once a budget is done, then you can do a financial and estate plan. And so often this is just not done well. And using out-of-the-box assumptions is not sufficient. In many cases, an aging parent whose life goal was to save enough money that they can live off the earnings of that money may have made a world of sense and been the reason that they grew their estate to where they grew it. But when they reach the level of a certain age, they'll never spend the money they have, and staying invested incredibly conservatively, which may have served them well until that point, is really detrimental to the wealth they're trying to pass on, because the bulk of the wealth that they're trying to pass on is really something that is not going to be spent, and it could be invested with a much longer-term time horizon than what they have. So again, a proper budget, financial plan, and so on makes sense. Forget the assumptions, forget the rules of thumb. Everybody has different issues and different experiences. Whether or not somebody has resources to pay for care, whether or not they have a long-term care policy, all these things can play on the determination of what should be done. Liquidity is an issue that needs to be addressed with aging, but too often many people as they age or have health challenges are overly focused on liquidity. And again, the asset allocation should be something that is appropriate for the circumstances. So one concept is to divide the assets into buckets. If there's a bucket that can hold enough assets that will suffice for 98% of the parent's life expectancy to make sure they will never run out of money, maybe the other buckets can be invested more aggressively. Annual meetings are critical to document what's going on. An investment policy statement is critical. And it's not only critical for the aging parent, because just like the comments about a budget giving you a touchstone to see what's out of the ordinary, if the parent, while they're alive and well, works on an investment policy statement each year, and that's amended and kept current, they've now created a history of what type of investment objectives they have, and if something happens, there's a history of what to do. Think of the benefit to that for let's say there's 4 children. One child is named agent under a power of attorney or trustee or successor trustee under a living trust. If there's been an ongoing history of investment policy statements, it sets a stage for what that child may choose to use from an investment perspective and how they may choose to invest. The other thing is, if the investment policies that the parent wants to pursue are out of the ordinary for any reason, that may be something the attorney can document in the governing agreements, such as the power of attorney or revocable living trust, so that as the child takes over and invests the way the parent wanted things invested, they won't be subjecting themselves to potential claim by other heirs or other children that they're violating the Prudent Investment Act. Let me just pause and give a general comment. What we're doing with this program is it's kind of a mile wide and an inch deep. And that's why we have sort of an eclectic group of panelists and a broad array of topics, because really the point we're trying to drive home is that for all of this planning, you really need to take a very, very broad view. So income tax planning is just one of a myriad of other components that need to be addressed. I'm just going to mention a few quick points, but the key point is that income tax planning care managers, organization, legal documents, financial planning, budgeting, etc. All these things need to be addressed to properly care and protect an aging parent. It's not just getting a will or talking to an elder law attorney. So the comment we made early on about needing a team, this is why. A couple of quick comments just to show you some of the significance. Disability insurance payments, if the parent is collecting, if they were paid personally, should not be taxable. Long-term care payments are generally treated as being for accident or health insurance and are tax-free. Life insurance, there's a raft of interesting rules that may permit somebody to get an accelerated death benefit. Too often I see as somebody gets on in years, if there's an event that occurs, the insurance is allowed to lapse. Often a terrible, terrible mistake. Before you do anything with a life insurance policy, you should have it evaluated to determine the myriad of options. Home modifications may qualify as a medical expense tax deduction. There's a couple of things you need to do to make that happen, so that needs to be planned for. Medical expenses with proper planning can be deductible. Oftentimes, people do not deduct things that could be deducted as a medical expense, and merely getting a prescription from the physician saying why the client, the aging parent, needs to have that because of a diagnosed medical condition, that may be sufficient to win the day on a tax audit. Now, some of these things are quite small from an income tax perspective, but when you add them together, they can really have a material impact on the financial status of the family. Insurance planning. Brian, do you want me to turn this over to you right now? You want to comment on all of it, or you want me to just wait for the property? I don't know if we lost Brian.
That I had my mic muted, so you didn't hear any background noise.
Oh, okay, that's fine. Do you want to comment on some of the general insurance stuff, or just the property and casualty?
I'll comment on all of it.
Okay, take it away.
So basically, life insurance, as Marty just mentioned, you want to make sure any policies that are around stay in force. You want to look at people's checkbooks to see what checks have been written, because that will give you an idea on what policies exist or what dividends have been received. If somebody is in failing health, there could be better options than just cashing the policy in. There is, as Marty mentioned, the accelerated death benefit, which allows you to access the death benefit if somebody is terminally ill. Thereby you get more than just the cash value. There are ways to actually sell the death benefit to get a portion of the death benefit if you're not terminally ill, but you're going to need money and you want to you have a limited time left in life. As time goes on, we're going to see this as more of an issue because the people that are in their, say, late 80s and 90s now may not have a lot of insurance, but the people that are in their 70s have done a lot of financial planning, and they're liable to be much more insurance issues down the road to have to deal with. Next slide. Property and casualty, very, very important. Many times there's estate planning done in reference to somebody, and they might change the ownership of the home. They might change it to a trust, an LLC. They might change it to the daughter's name, the son's name, something like that. The insurance agent has to know what's going on, or there's a chance of having no insurance at all, even though there's a policy. Because if you change the ownership to your daughter, it is the same as selling your house to a stranger. Your daughter doesn't have insurance, nobody has insurance. Also, I had a situation just now that we're working on. One of my clients did a renovation of their house so their parents can move in. So there's multiple items that have to be dealt with. One, your insurance agent has to know that you're renovating the house so that they can have the proper insurance coverage on that house. The parents, even though they may not be paying rent, they need to get a renter's or tenant's policy to protect, one, their personal property because it's not going to be covered on your policy, and two, they want to have liability coverage so that if a caretaker does come in and does trip and fall and sues them, their assets don't go away in that lawsuit. So that is very, very important. You want to make sure that if they've gotten rid of items over time, that their insurance is up to date and current to the limits they were supposed to be in reference to their general personal property, but also in reference to jewelry items that have been given to daughters or sons or grandchildren or items like that, so those items can be removed from the policy. Also the same with artwork, antiques, collectibles. of that nature should all be adjusted. Find out if you can put the policies, if they are living in their own place, find out if they can be put on auto payment. That way you don't have to worry about lapsing the policy. And if they move into an assisted living facility, they still need insurance for the same reason they need insurance as they move into your house. So it's very important. A lot of people just don't do it. Long-term care insurance. There's 3 different types of long-term care policies, basically. There's a standalone policy, which is a regular long-term care policy. There's long-term care policies that are tied to life insurance, and there's long-term care policies tied to annuities. Those other 2 policies could be a little bit easier to get in reference to, in addition to regular long-term care policies, because they may not qualify because of health. And using a care coordinator is very important in reference to getting the best out of your long-term care policies. Go ahead, Marty.
Okay, sorry about that. I'm going to go fairly quickly through some of the rest of the slides so we can finish approximately on time. And we've covered some of these concepts already. One of the issues that you have to deal with any aging parent is the question of capacity or competency. We've talked to a degree about that earlier. And I've mentioned that it's critical not to make any assumptions. You can certainly involve a care manager in order to help interpret some of the medical data so you can understand better where the aging parent is at, and so on. One of the key points on these slides is, again, you can't make assumptions because physical disability doesn't necessarily in any way correlate with mental incapacity. And similarly, the fact that somebody looks perfectly well doesn't necessarily confirm that they have the level of capacity that you might assume from their physical appearance. Eric mentioned a concept earlier, which I think is very important. Too often, people treat capacity as sort of an all-or-none situation. And Eric made the very important point of explaining that somebody at the age may be just as capable intellectually. They may just process information more slowly. So those are things that you need to understand. The fact that somebody has word-finding difficulties or responds more slowly doesn't mean they don't understand as well as they had before. Memory impact can affect short-term memory but not long-term. So you need to be very concerned of what steps are being taken to evaluate the parent before a legal document is signed or gifts are made or decisions are made, whether or not they really have the ability to understand and make them. And if they do have the ability, you certainly don't want to shortchange or underestimate that ability and therefore take control away from the parent when it's not necessary. And then a number of the things that we've talked about in terms of organizing and financial planning can help keep the parent in control much longer. So as the parent has an impact on executive functioning skills such as planning, prioritizing, doing a bank reconciliation, to the extent that you involve an accountant, to the extent you've organized their data, consolidated and simplified their financial holdings, you can keep them in control far longer, and that really should be one of the benefits. And just like we said earlier, and I don't want to belabor it, don't make assumptions if one person in the family has Parkinson's and somebody else has a different disease, or because somebody's reached a certain age, don't assume a particular impact. It may or may not be anything remotely like what somebody else has. Alzheimer's disease is being diagnosed earlier and earlier, and too often there's the assumption made that, oh, if somebody has Alzheimer's, they really aren't competent to do anything, and that's really not the case at all. With earlier and earlier diagnosis, it's not only possible but appropriate to keep an aging parent that's even been diagnosed with Alzheimer's in the early stages fully involved in their own decision making. Be aware that it's not just the capacity of the individual that's an issue. Many of the chronic illnesses can result in apathy, indifference. So that may be more difficult of a challenge to moving forward with planning than anything else. So an aging parent may be depressed over a diagnosis of Alzheimer's or Parkinson's or another chronic illness, or they may be depressed over their physical decline. But in addition, there's many of the diseases, the chronic illnesses, it's a function of the disease as well to create depression and apathy. So it's not only from their declining situation that they may be depressed, but they may become depressed or apathetic just because of the impact of the disease. And sometimes using a care manager or a family member to motivate the aging parent to go into the attorney and do the planning, to go into the financial planner and get things simplified and organized, those things are critical. So you got to often overcome the apathy or deal with the depression. It's not just the cognitive impact. Let's skip through this. Again, as I said earlier, the ultimate determination of competency is really a legal decision when it comes to legal documents, gifting, and other legal actions. The medical documentation could be critically important to that. You could choose to involve a care manager. And one of the problems that becomes significant for many estates is where a parent in later years goes to change a will to benefit different children differently because of how things have played out, or in too many cases that we've seen over the years, to benefit a caregiver and to the exclusion of other people. You need to make sure that the issues of competency are properly addressed. This is also why planning well early on and using irrevocable trust where significant assets and wealth are structured in a way that they can't be subject to undue influence can avoid or at least mitigate against these problems later. Bear in mind that, again, competency or capacity are situationally determined. So if somebody's writing a will leaving assets equally to their 3 children, I don't think any attorney would be particularly worried about that. If the same person were leaving all their assets to 1 child or 1 child and a caregiver who's not a family member, there'd be great concern. So you need to look at the situation. Legally, there's also different levels of competency that are required for different actions. So the competency, the capacity that's required to sign a will is the lowest because the law wants to assure that people do have an opportunity to sign a will. Contractual capacity is higher. Power of attorney, depending on state law, could use one or the other of those definitions. Signing a trust is a contractual arrangement. So if there's going to be trust planning, it's better, preferable to do it early on before there is an issue of capacity. The fact that someone cannot any longer sign an irrevocable trust doesn't mean they cannot sign a will. Some of the factors to consider are the complexity, the degree of harm, the natural or unnatural nature of what they're doing, the historical pattern. And that's something we've talked about in a number of points in the presentation today, from investment policy statements to budgets and so on. When you create a track record of what the parent is hoping to accomplish and their new step, their new will, their new plan, their new investment plan, etc., is consistent with a historical pattern that can be demonstrated from the data that we've talked about, it's far more difficult for someone to challenge that or upset that. One of the things that needs to be done when planning is to consider the future impact of competency changes. So if the parent has a particular disease like Alzheimer's that will assuredly result in a loss of capacity at some point, then obviously planning should be accelerated so that the appropriate safeguards are put in place before that will happen. What is the future impact? People should also bear in mind that the changes over time can vary significantly from person to person, and that the periodic revisiting of the aging parent's status is critical, because if there's a significant decline that was not noticed, it may be really essential to protect them to take more quick and significant action, perhaps even change or move them from the residence they're in to an assisted care facility. If the changes occur much more gradually, the declines, than what was initially anticipated, more can be done to continue to empower the parent to be as independent as possible. We're going to finish up in just a couple of minutes. HIPAA releases, very quickly, are a legal document that authorizes someone to access medical records. Just very quickly, people generally tend to address health proxies or living wills and not HIPAA releases. It may be possible that an aging parent will be taken to the hospital and for a period of time will not be able to communicate or make decisions, but because there's a full recovery expected, there may be no issue of having to turn over medical decision-making control to somebody else. On the other hand, that doesn't authorize anyone to see and merely monitor their medical records. So signing a HIPAA release is really one of the 3 critical documents for healthcare, along with the living will and the health proxy. We're going to skip through that. Now, estate planning, again, the same comment we made earlier, aging and disease can disempower, planning can empower when it's done creatively and appropriately. Most standard forms don't address a lot of these issues. A quick example, the disability clause in most powers of attorney that are springing, which means they become effective when the parent's disabled or replacement of a parent as a current trustee of their living trust, most of those disability provisions are really so generic that they really don't address the types of issues many parents will face. And that can be something that you can, with very simple effort, tweak or modify to better protect your parent. So if a parent has a short-term hospitalization and they were the trustee of their living trust, they may now be removed as a trustee. What do you do to get them reinstated? So a simple approach may be, especially as someone gets on in years, is to have a co-trustee so someone can manage the trust while the parent is incapacitated or temporarily unable to do things because they're hospitalized. You could put a provision in the document that the parent must be incapacitated for, say, more than 30 days before they're removed as a trustee. So in that way, they remain in control. If they come out of the hospital a week later, they have not technically been removed as a trustee of their own trust. Similarly, for powers of attorney, some thought should be given to compensation of the agent who's going to act. Too often it's not done. If somebody's going to take over mom or dad's finances for a decade and do a significant amount of work, compensation is appropriate and can often prevent the jealousy or the anger that can grow between the children, where one child has got all the burdens and the others do not. Living wills and health proxies, bear in mind that it should be tailored to address the parent's specific wishes, religious wishes, personal preferences. If the parent has a known disease or ailment, that should also be addressed because the parent may want, for example, experimental treatment, which many documents simply don't provide for. Healthcare proxies, lots of issues arise with respect to the selection of agent. And should it be one child, both children? You typically don't want to have more than one person named. In many states it's illegal and the document will be invalidated. Guardianship appointments should be considered. If you're entrusting somebody, your parents entrusting somebody to make really life and death medical decisions, if they had to have a guardian appointed, why wouldn't they want that person to be favored as the person to be appointed by a court? Often overlooked. Let's skip through that. Revocable living trusts can be one of the most powerful tools for planning. Too often they're looked at merely as something to avoid the purported evils of probate. When more intelligently done and tailored to address a parent's specific needs, they can be an incredibly powerful tool. I gave some examples earlier. My favorite approach to using a revocable trust for somebody that has aging or health issues is to set up a trust with all their assets consolidated in a trust company and have the parent and trust company as co-trustees and then name successors. So you have the independence and professionalism of a professional trustee managing the assets, and then to integrate a requirement or mandate that at least quarterly there be an independent care manager that visits the parent and writes a report to the independent institutional trustee. So in that way, if anybody, even a close family member, is up to no good, the parent is well protected. So those are a couple of the ways you can address these issues. For many aging parents, their home is really their ultimate refuge, sanctuary. You know, the old saying, a person's home is their castle. You know, they may want to direct that they remain in their home as long as possible. There's obviously financial and other decisions that have to be considered in doing so. Too often the standard boilerplate language may do the opposite of what the parent wants. Lots of people like to give charity and maybe have given charity their whole life, but yet when they get on in years and an agent under a power of attorney or a successor trustee under their living trust is acting on their behalf, there may be no authorization to give charity. I like to provide that at least historical charitable gifts can be continued, and if you've listened to the advice for your parent that we gave early on in the program about creating a budget, so there's some historical reference, it becomes easy for the trustee to address that. You may even want to have, or your parent may want to have certain mandated expenditures to support certain lifestyle decisions. A parent may have, had as one of their wishes to pay for college for grandchildren. That should be addressed specifically. Again, while the generic provisions in many documents will address that, without a separate letter of instruction or something more explicit in the document, it simply may not be addressed. Again, the issue of compensation, just like with the power of attorney, if you have one child that's bearing the burden, I would encourage compensation be paid. It's something that can avoid the feeling of anger or resentment that the child shouldering the burden feels towards the other children. One of the concepts that we've already talked about, and I want to reiterate, and I did it early on in the context of the family accountant, is to have somebody in a monitor relationship or position. So even if you have an institutional trustee, if you have an independent accountant that writes up the books and records for the parent on a periodic basis, if a child is acting as agent under a power of attorney, for example, having independent corroboration that nothing amiss is going on is not only helpful to protect the parent, but it can prevent family feuds and other arguments because there's somebody independent that can corroborate that nothing untoward has been done. Charitable planning is something we've mentioned at a couple points in time. Many aging parents, if they have a particular disease or issue, they may like the concept of a charitable gift annuity. I'm leaving aside the financial evaluation of that from an investment perspective, but from an emotional perspective, if there's a particular charity, if the parent is living with Alzheimer's, they may very well want to buy CGAs from the Alzheimer's Association because it's not just about the assured cash flow it's giving them, but it's about helping an organization that may have done good for them as well. There can be some very creative uses of charitable remainder trusts, especially with the new higher income tax rates that we face in order to achieve personal goals. Let me wrap up because we're a couple minutes over time, and then give each of our panelists a quick minute, folks, to wrap up. And when we're done, again, I'll give you some sources for more information. We've discussed a myriad of different planning issues that can affect an aging parent. So whether you're a child or other family member looking to protect a parent or aging family member, hopefully what we've done is given you some consideration or understanding of the broad spectrum of planning that you really want to undertake to make sure the parent, as they age, is really not only well provided for and protected, but to maintain their independence. Be very cautious about making assumptions. You don't have to be an expert in all areas. Use the team approach. The team approach doesn't require an enormous amount of money. It can be something as simple as a periodic, even once or twice a year, conference call of the different experts to minimize the cost. But getting and touching all the different disciplines and expertise will help you do a far better job of protecting an aging parent. And for the professional advisors on the phone, I encourage all of you to work as much as possible in a team mode, because you will do a far better job for your client in protecting that aging parent. Standard documents and planning is a great starting point, but often they'll need to be tweaked or modified to address the specific and unique circumstances of the aging parent. Understand the specific impact on the specific person and what planning means to them. Don't make assumptions again. Don't be uncomfortable to ask detailed and personal questions, whether you're the child, the caregiver, or the aging parent yourself listening to the call. By not asking and dealing with the uncomfortable situations, you're only exposing everybody to worse problems down the road. Be creative. Sometimes, and I gave you some examples with a simple provision for a replacement of a trustee under a living trust, sometimes a simple tweak to a standard planning technique can be all that's necessary. Before I turn the mic over, or the phone over to each of the panelists for a quick final comment, I've listed on the slide, and I'll leave it up here, a bunch of different websites and contact data for each of the panelists, Carol Kaufman, Brian Boak, and Eric Maynard, who I'm sure will be happy to answer questions and receive emails. A recording of this program will be put as soon as we can on laweasy.com, so if you or anyone you know would like to listen to it, it'll be there. And already we have the actual PowerPoint and a text document of the contents of the PowerPoint, if that's easier for you or an aging parent to look at and consider. So thank you for joining us. I hope the program was useful and worthwhile. We'll be doing approximately 2 programs a month, and I'll email everybody that's attended, since I'll have your email announcements for those programs. Let's turn it over. Carol, why don't we go through in order? Do you have a couple final comments?
Sure. Allowing a diverse team of advisors to properly protect a client's assets, legacy, and well-being is dependent upon having a sound foundation and knowledge of all of the assets, tangible and intangible, that actually exist. Creating a life inventory serves this purpose and helps prevent things from falling through the cracks. To the webinar attendees, if you're asking, what can I do? The answer is start now. Start pulling information together. You'll only be moving forward, allowing assets to be tagged, found, and properly used and distributed. And just remember to update the inventory to keep it current.
Thanks, Carol. Brian, final comment?
A review of all the insurance coverage is very important to make sure everything is correct and accurate, because many times we find things that don't exist or haven't existed for years on policies. And getting a third-party independent review of all the insurance on a more complex situation is a very good idea.
And let me just add to Brian's comment, one of the things that we see missed and overlooked so often, especially for an aging parent, is the level of coverage on an umbrella or personal excess liability policy. You know, if the parent had a small policy, if any, decades ago, they may never have increased it, and that's something that is really critical to look at. Eric, final comment?
Sure, thank you. And having a patient advocate, an RN, as part of the planning process to oversee what the person's immediate needs are is very important for improving their quality of life. Thank you, Marty.
Okay, thank you everyone for joining us. I hope that the webinar was informative, and we will try to post a recording. If you have any comments or suggestions, my email is Schenkman@schenkmanlaw, SHENKMAN @schenkmanlaw.com. I welcome any input, suggestions, criticism, etc. Thanks again, everybody, and thank you to our panelists. Bye-bye.